Welcome to Muslims and Mental Health with Sister Heather, a groundbreaking program looking at mental health issues through the biopsychosocial spiritual paradigm.
Welcome to another episode of Muslims and Mental Health. Today we'll be discussing Ramadan and how teens prepare, practice, and can best utilize the month of Ramadan. I'll be joined today with Dr. Sawssan Ahmed. She is a professor at Cal State Fullerton in psychology, teaching in child and adolescent psychology. She also conducts research on child and adolescents in the Arab and Muslim American communities. She is also on the board of the Orange Crescent School in Garden Grove, California. But before we get to Dr. Sawssan, I would like to just talk a little bit about Ramadan. Ramadan is one important aspect of the Muslims' religious and spiritual practice. In Islam, Ramadan is the holy month of fasting, introspection, and prayer. Fasting is one of the 5 fundamental principles in Islam. It's one of the 5 pillars of Islam. And each day during Ramadan, followers of Islam, known as Muslims, do not eat or drink from sunrise to sunset. They are also supposed to avoid impure thoughts and bad behavior. They also abstain from sexual relations and things like smoking. Muslims break their daily fast by sharing meals with family and friends. And at the end of Ramadan is celebrated Eid al-Fitr, known as the 3-day festival that is the breaking of the fast. And it's one of Islam's major holidays. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Sawssan Ahmed. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you, Heather.
I want to start by exploring Ramadan for teens and how they can best, utilize this month. How does Ramadan impact the lives of teens, and why is Ramadan important to a teen?
I think Ramadan is really important to teenagers, adolescents, because it's a great time for them to feel spiritually connected to the greater Muslim community. As you mentioned earlier, in your introduction, Muslims get together to break their fast, and it's a good time, to get together with family and the community. And for teens, I think sometimes they can feel very isolated and alone, or maybe just introverted into their own world as being a teenager, especially, I guess, in the U.S. Mm-hmm. And so for adolescents, Ramadan is a great time for them to feel part of a larger community, because they know, you can pray any time of the day. It doesn't mean you're going to be praying. You can be praying by yourself, but with Ramadan, you're fasting with the entire Muslim community, and to feel that connection, I think it gives you a sense of identity, especially as we know that adolescence is a time when, people are thinking about their identity, thinking about how, who they are and what that means to them. And Ramadan is a good place for them to really think about that in that sense. And I think another thing that makes it really important for teenagers is that it builds their sense of self-discipline. Mm-hmm. We know that with adolescents, their frontal lobe is still developing. And so, they do things, maybe they make decisions that are maybe not the greatest, and it's a good way for them to practice that self-discipline just by abstaining from, food and drink and, even just the impure thoughts. Just being able to train yourself and thinking about that, I think, is a really good opportunity for adolescents to think about that concept, that they do have some control over their actions, and if they can control a simple need like food and drink, which is a need as part of the lowest levels of needs, that then they can control other things as well. And so I think it's a good training sort of for them.
Great. And what do you suggest that parents do with teens during this month of Ramadan, given that it's such a good time for training?
I think they can, parents can do a lot of different things. One thing they can do is have, obviously take your teen to Taraweeh. I think Taraweeh is an extra prayer. It's not even just Taraweeh. They can go to Fajr. They can, have them more involved in the masjid, and going into the masjid and feeling that spiritual connection is one way to get them involved. And another way they can get them involved is just in the various traditions that you have in your home that are related to Ramadan, whether it's certain, decorations or foods that you prepare during Ramadan. I think teens can be very, very involved in that. And I think they can also be involved in helping the community. I think I'm sure we'll talk about this in a little bit, but just they can be involved in, I had one of my friends, what she does with her teenage daughter is like the day before Ramadan starts, they buy a bunch of dates, they open them and they put walnuts, and they go when people are breaking their fast at the masjid, they go to the masjid and serve dates. And it's just a simple way that a teenager can be very involved in the community and doing something for the community, and also feeling that, again, that connection to that community, and feeling the importance of Ramadan, that this is a very special time. I think is really a great way to look at it. I think for some teens, for teens and, children and even adults too, that sometimes it can feel that Ramadan is like a burden. It's, it's hard. It's a long day. I'm thirsty. I'm hungry. I'm tired. And having it being more celebratory, I think, is a great way to introduce spiritual sort of practices and keep them steadfast on that.
And so I want to circle back for a second, and just for our non-Muslim viewers or the other clinicians that are watching,
Sure.
Could you actually explain what Tarawih is?
Sure. Yeah. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
So Tarawih are it's nightly sort of extra prayers that happen every night, starting with the night before the Ramadan. And it's usually done at the masjid. It can also be done at home in a community, but they're just sort of extra prayers. It's a nice way to feel that spiritual connection. And they're done. And again, it's done after you break your fast. Usually people will go to the masjid and pray these extra prayers.
And I just want to distinguish also for our non-Muslim viewers that this is also a practice that Shia Muslims don't do. But you'll see Sunnis doing. And okay, great.
And I believe Shia mosques also have events during Ramadan at night. I've been to some of those.
Yeah. Do you know what they do?
I think they have lectures, sort of extra lectures as well. Again, it's a way to see the community and sort of, again, there's some people you only see during Ramadan. So,
right.
Yeah.
Okay. And how can teens best utilize Ramadan for their own psychological and spiritual development?
I think I think they can do it in different ways. In psychological development, I think one way is, or in spiritual development, is to start Ramadan with a goal of something they want to work on. Whether it's they want to stop gossiping, whether they want to learn how to, give to charity, just to have some sort of goal of something they want to work on, and use Ramadan as a basis to do that. Reading a page of Quran every day, reading. Whatever your goal is, being steadfast in your prayers, praying 5 times a day, and try to practice that during Ramadan. You get that because you have that boost of being around the community. Mm-hmm. It's a good way to kind of work on something that you would like to, that you have a goal for yourself. And I think another way for them to do so in terms of psychological development is I think teens shouldn't be afraid to tell their friends, if they're non-Muslim friends, their teachers, that they're fasting. Mm-hmm. I think instead of they don't have to say, oh, I'm not eating, I'm not hungry. Maybe it's a good way to introduce, especially if you've been shy about it, and to introduce what you are, what your spiritual faith is, and have your friends see that. And I've seen people have told me that once their friends know they're fasting, then their friends want to fast with them too. Mm-hmm. It's as a way to support them. And I think that's just a great way to have others understand what your faith is.
Mm-hmm. Especially during that time of identity development,
mm-hmm.
right?
Exactly.
And because we see on the college campuses, they do actually
mm-hmm.
have fastathons, and people try to do communal fasting, whether they're Muslim or not. And
and I think even maybe inviting your friends over for one of the iftars, asking your parents, is it okay if I bring my friends over to break the fast with us? And I think is a good way, again, to sort of be proud of your identity, and for people to know what you are and sort of what you stand for. And I think people enjoy that. People like to participate in other people's traditions.
Okay. And so you kind of touched on this a little bit already, but I want to go back to it. In what ways can teens be involved in the Muslim community during Ramadan, both between Muslims and then in the broader context of a larger community?
Sure. So I think I talked about it a little bit, but I think I love the idea that what my friend does with her daughter, going there and they giving people dates for them to break their fast at the masjid. But even just, I think you can be involved in many different ways. You can be involved in getting the mosque ready for Tarawih, or cleaning up after iftar. There's so many things you can do. You can find out, give to the needy in your community. And I think that doesn't, that could be within Muslims, and also in the greater community. I think it's a great opportunity to do that. And I think being involved, I think it's a great time you have all this time where you're not eating and you're not cooking and you're not grocery shopping, maybe for teens to be involved in some sort of service activity, whether it's going to feed the homeless, whether it's going to find out what the community needs, and being involved in that, I think I think a lot of times also teens, Ramadan's a good time to maybe watch less movies, watch less TV, be involved in less social media, and it's using that extra time to give back to the community. I think Ramadan presents a great opportunity to do so.
Okay, great. Now, switching hats for a minute, how can other clinicians help teens during Ramadan, and what should they be considering in their treatment? If they're seeing a patient who's a Muslim and it's Ramadan, what would you advise them?
I think there's, the basic physical sort of considerations, that the person might be tired, when is the time of the session? Is it around, before iftar, or is it, and maybe that's not such a good time. So I think, especially, teens who are in school and see their therapist after school, maybe that might not be the best time. So the physical considerations are one. I think in just psychological considerations, I think using Ramadan as sort of like a metaphor for struggles in life. You're struggling right now, you've given up, you're not eating and drinking during the day. How is that, how does that mirror your other struggles? Can you use that sort of discipline or draw the strength you're using to do that for your other difficulties in life, I think is one way. And also just the idea of, refraining that, during Ramadan, we try to refrain from, thinking bad thoughts or doing, saying bad, things that you shouldn't be saying, like lying or gossiping. And again, using those as metaphors or ways to think about changing your cognitions, and using those as examples, I think is one way clinicians can help teens that they're seeing during Ramadan.
And I also had a thought, you wouldn't find it unusual if a teen stopped going to therapy maybe during the month of Ramadan, right? I mean,
definitely. I think it wouldn't be unusual at all, again, because I think that there's so much going on during Ramadan, I think, for the Muslim community on the day-to-day, just that, again, they might not show up at all. And I don't think that the clinician should think that it's, they've given up on their treatment, but maybe they're just taking a little break, and maybe the clinician should ask them and, approach them directly about it. They might be embarrassed to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so also we know globally that many Muslims are facing different circumstances around the world, and especially during the month of Ramadan. And part of Ramadan is the commitment to charitable acts as well. What are ways that you think in which American teens could contribute to teens worldwide during Ramadan?
I think, again, they can think about which ways they want to help the global community, whether it be, monetary help, whether it's, maybe deciding that for the month of Ramadan, I'm not going to spend my allowance. Instead, I'm going to give it to charity to help the community, or other ways that it could be. It doesn't have to just be monetary. It could be, service. Again, putting some hygiene kits for the homeless, or gathering blankets for the children and adults in the refugee camps, things like that. I think that there are different ways it can contribute, and I think they should be encouraged to do so. I think in Ramadan is a great way to take a habit that you want to have and you haven't been able to do it. You haven't been able to establish it as a habit yet, but to take it and practice that habit, and kind of so that you can extend it beyond Ramadan. I think as Muslims, we try to think of Ramadan as that spiritual charge that we know, and I think that goes for, all sorts of things that you kind of want to work on for your self-development. For teens, that's one way for them to do that.
Mm-hmm. Great. And so I'm going to ask you, on a personal level,
Sure.
Being raised Muslim, what was Ramadan like for you as a teen?
Ramadan was always very exciting. So, it was a very exciting time of the year. It was loved getting together with the family and the community for iftars, eating your favorite foods. There's, foods that you only have during Ramadan because nobody's going to sit there and spend hours cooking otherwise. So remembering those, obviously, I just remember praying Taraweeh. I loved going to the masjid and praying Taraweeh, even though, as a teen, you're like, oh, this is so long. And now, when you're older, you don't have as much time, or, so that's sort of what I remember, what I really liked about Ramadan, just that anticipation, and then that it's starting, and then once it's starting, you're sort of getting that routine, and then it, that's sort of what I remember about it. I also, I had friends who would fast with me, and that was really nice as well. I think, again, it's a good time to be openly Muslim, as Ramadan is, because it's sort of a simple thing, and people understand it. A lot of religions have fasts, so they understand that you are fasting, and this is how you are fasting. So,
Okay, great. At this time, I want to take a break for our sponsor, but we'll be coming back shortly to ask Dr. Sawssan some more questions.
Hi, welcome to Adelante. This is Adelante Recovery, and my name is Yvette Kuglin, and I'm part of the staff.
Adelante Recovery Center has helped people in dual diagnosis for 5 years. We accept most PPO insurances and provide luxury accommodations and 24-hour support. To speak with an admissions counselor, call 1-888-242-4450.
A lot of time we don't even know what's wrong with us, and sometimes we need to get away to figure that out. So if you want to go for a little retreat out in Corona Del Mar, which is a confidential location, we're here to help. So we're only a phone call away. Thank you.
Welcome back to Muslims and Mental Health. Today we are discussing Ramadan and how teens can prepare, practice, and best utilize the month of Ramadan. I'm joined with Dr. Sawssan Ahmed, and we're going to continue with our questions, one of which is, when we think about the spectrum of Muslims and their practice, and we have some people who are very practicing, and then we have some people who are in the middle, and then we have some people that are barely hanging on, identifying as Muslim in name only. What could you advise them around the month of Ramadan, especially the teenagers, how they could best utilize Ramadan?
I think teens, again, from the whole spectrum, should think of Ramadan as sort of an opportunity. So it's sort of a time for rejuvenation, and not to think of it as a time or, because they think they're not good enough or they're not a good enough Muslim, then they shouldn't participate in anything, that they shouldn't think it's an all or nothing kind of situation, that they should think of it as, just a tiny thing that maybe they want to work on. If they want to start praying, they're not praying now, and maybe they want to start praying. Maybe they can use Ramadan as a time to practice praying once a day. So forget going to Taraweeh, that might be too much, to start, small. Whether it's to pray, Aisha prayer or pray Fajr prayer. Or maybe they don't fast usually. Maybe it's a time for them to work on fasting. So I think it doesn't have to be that you have to be this perfect Muslim during Ramadan, and that's the only way to take any advantage from the holy month. I think they should think of it as a time to again, just betterment of self. Whether it's and it could be even just not gossiping, and that's just we think it's a small thing, but it's actually a really big thing. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't have to be something that it needs to feel like it's something big and unattainable for anyone for teens across the spectrum.
Right. And is there anything else you would like teens to know about Ramadan?
I think one thing to think about, I think we talk about Ramadan a lot, about, this is a great month, and and the shaitan is locked up, so everything bad that you do is actually from you, and it's not from Satan, and sort of there's that concept that we understand. But just sometimes Ramadan is tough, and sometimes for you as a teen, and even adults and children, of course, that it's hard, and that all you do get out of it is you feel like all you got out of it is being hungry and thirsty. And I think if we do feel that way, that we shouldn't feel bad about ourselves, that we're not, a good enough person, or we have no spiritual development, or or no spiritual core. I think we have to be forgiving of ourselves as Muslims. I think especially teenagers, again, that it's okay if that's all you got out of it is being hungry and thirsty. That's okay. Don't feel bad about yourself. Mm-hmm. I think obviously we do talk a lot about it being an opportunity and a time for rejuvenation, but it's also, it's a struggle. It's a spiritual struggle. And that's why I think Ramadan, when we learn about Ramadan, we learn that, you fast only for Allah. You're not fasting for anybody else. So because Allah is the only one who he really knows if you're fasting, because you could be hiding, a piece of candy or whatever.
Well, I think you bring up such a great point about people in general, but specifically for teens and their development. When you think about when it comes to spirituality and their spiritual development, their harsh inner critic, right? And like you said, this is a great time for them to look at that, because oftentimes that's what's really getting in the way, right? And so what would you tell a teen who recognizes, who has the insight that they are giving themselves these kind of harsh messages about themselves? Because maybe hearing you say that is the first time they will acknowledge that, I am doing that. I am talking to myself that way. What would you advise them then to go from there?
I think to focus on sort of the positive. Well, what are you doing that's right? And we all make mistakes, and we're all humans. And especially with, again, adolescence, again, I'm going to bring up the frontal lobe again, but it's a time where there's these challenges, and it's okay to mess up. It's okay to make a mistake, and feeling bad about yourself or criticizing yourself is not going to move you forward. It's just going to keep you stuck. In fact, it might move you backwards. So I think helping a teen, even as clinicians, to think about that. What good did you do? Okay, so you fasted, so you didn't fast the full 30 days, or you didn't pray the 5 prayers on time. What did you do? And good for you that you did that and you were able to do that, and moving forward from that. Because it's easy when we get stuck on criticizing ourselves and thinking about, what we did wrong or how we weren't perfect this or great at this. It's really easy actually to slip backwards. I know for me, myself, that's what happens. So, so focusing on the positive and moving forward.
Great. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to come in today and share this with us.
Thank you.
I want to transition now into part of the interview that we do with our fun questions that we do with every interview, and ask you who your Muslim hero is, if you have one, and why.
Okay, so I don't have one Muslim hero, but I thought of a few. I thought of Sayyidina Khadija, of course, just being a strong Muslim woman, being sort of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ's like number one supporter, but she also had her own career. She had her own life, and she was able to use that to help the Muslim community. So I think about her, and I think about just Muslims who have always championed sort of social justice. Thinking about Malcolm X, and thinking about what he did for the Muslim community. Just the sort of the modern Muslim community, and being a champion for social justice. I mean, there are so many things that are relevant that he said and did to sort of our circumstances today as Muslims in the U.S. and also just Muslims in the world. So I think about him. I think about the Prophet ﷺ's uncle Hamza, who sort of stood by him. He was like his sort of fought for him. He was loyal. So I think about him as well. I guess I don't really have one hero.
Well, those are
there are many
examples.
stories, many heroes.
That's great. So what is your favorite concept and why?
So my favorite, I think, concept when I think about, I really love the concept in Islam, and it's come up in the Quran several times, but the idea that with every hardship there's ease. I've always liked that concept, because I think that, that people take, or even just the idea that hardship and struggle is a way that God is sort of like rewarding you, that if he makes everything easy for you, that you really don't have any opportunity to sort of struggle and work on things and get better. So I think about that a lot, even in my own research. I like to look at risk and protective factors, and maybe it's because that concept is very important to me, the idea There's things that we struggle with, but there's things that are easy for us, and that when something hard comes along or struggle comes along, not to think that, that we're not loved or God doesn't love us or we won't get through this. But I think that comes a lot, when you think about therapy as well, that the idea is that, you can move beyond that, and that there's, there's ease that's going to come with it. There's that kind of thing. So I really like that concept.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And what is your favorite word and why?
It's hard to pin down one word, but I think of like justice a lot. And I guess I've been thinking about this a lot lately. But I think I think it's a favorite word for me, because I feel like God is just, and even though we might not see justice in this world, we'll see it in the hereafter. But just justice is so important, that as a as a community, as a worldwide community, that that without us always moving towards that goal, this ideal, that we're sort of going to be stuck, and that we should always be working towards that. And it's an ideal, maybe we'll never get there because God is the only one that's just, but that we should always be working towards that. And I think it shouldn't just be justice for us as a community. I think as sometimes Muslims, we only think about the Muslim community, but we shouldn't do that, because justice is important for everyone, and to think about it again just as part of the greater American community, the greater global community. I'm thinking about that. So that's my cliched answer.
I think it's a great answer. I think it's consistent with, what you've shared with us today, because without compassion and love, you can't have justice. Mm-hmm. And you talk a lot about those concepts, although you don't mention them directly. You're talking about compassion and love when talking about teens and Ramadan, and it's just all very consistent. So it's not surprising. But I want to say thank you so much for joining us today, and it's been a real pleasure, and I think that people will learn a lot from what you've shared. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And this concludes another episode of Muslims and Mental Health. We strongly encourage you to give us your feedback, your concerns, and you can do so by contacting us at nafshealertherapy@gmail.com. Again, that's NAFSHEALER therapy@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us.